Good evening, everyone. How's everyone doing? Welcome to the People's Forum. It is, for us, a great honor to welcome all of you into our space, a space that is dedicated to engaging with political education, with movement building, with internationalism, and not our commitment since October 7th, but our permanent commitment to stand with the people of Palestine in their struggle for national liberation. We are also undoubtedly very honored and very excited to welcome an old friend, comrade, someone who has been with us on the first line, on the trenches of what we call the battle of ideas. Dr. Rabab Abdulhadi is not just a guest of honor, but she is truly part of this space, part of its conception, part of its ideas, part of its everyday work. And I wanted to start welcoming you all by reflecting on the song that we just listened to, which is not just an ordinary song, it's not just any Palestinian song, but is Mautini, what many consider to be the national anthem of the Palestinian people, in which, in many of its lines, one of my favorite lines that stirs me every time I get goosebumps thinking of it, is that the youth will not tire, the youth will not give up in the struggle for independence. That inspires us. That inspires us in what has become the fundamental political question of our time in the last 6 weeks. The Biden administration, the Israeli regime, have all wished and designed that we would get tired, that we would give up, that we would find every possible reason to discredit the Palestinian people and their struggle, that we would find excuses to back off and say, it is not a just cause. But it has been because of the persistent work over decades by comrades like Dr. Rabab that we can firmly stand here and say, without a shred of doubt, without any element of fear, that not only do the Palestinian people have a right to resist, but that the peoples of the world have a responsibility, a political, moral, and ethical responsibility to stand by them in that resistance. A resistance which takes many forms. It takes the form of an October 7th where people break out of the concentration camp. It takes the form of those who continue to write and denounce. And it takes the form of courageous, organic intellectuals like Dr. Rabab who refuse to be silenced. And one of the reasons we love our dear Dr. Rabab is not only does she fight, she wins. She does not allow herself to be defeated by those who in Western academia think it's convenient to only talk about Palestine when no one's looking, or who only think it's okay to talk about Palestine if you only talk about equal rights for Israel. Israel has no rights. Occupiers, colonizers, imperialists have no rights in our book. So we welcome you to this evening, confident that the information, the knowledge, the experiences that Dr. Rabab brings to this discussion will further continue to strengthen our understanding of this historic moment we're living in, will push us further as we continue to consolidate a movement that is now not of tens or hundreds or thousands of people, but millions of people around the planet who see in this moment the hour of liberation, not just for the Palestinian people, but for every living human being on the planet. We are confident that Rabab, because of her work, not just as an academic, not just as an intellectual, but as an organizer for these years, will help us elucidate and connect and forge what is obvious to some, but needs to be even clearer to many. That the struggle for Palestinian liberation is the cause of Black liberation, is the cause of Latino liberation, is the cause of the working people's liberation everywhere on the planet. So thank you, Dr. Rabab. This is your house. You do with this mic as you wish. There is nothing you cannot say or you cannot do in this house.
Thank you. I'm gonna try. I'm very, first of all, I need to stand and just get my water, if you don't mind. And, well, first I'm gonna begin by apologizing because New York traffic is crazy. Okay. Secondly, I wanted to begin by saying that a lot of these kids who were singing Mawtani from the Edward Said Orchestra, that was a Palestinian found in Jerusalem, we do not know where they are. I thought this would be something that would be uplifting, because it is uplifting, but we do not know. And I've communicated today with the director, the founder, and the director of Yabous Center, the founder of Edward Said Orchestra, Sohail Khouri, and the director of Yabous Center in Jerusalem. And I said, we would like to play this. Do you know what's happening to these kids? And they said, actually, we're really sorry, we do not know. We have no accurate information about the kids or the building, because there is a building for the Edward Said Orchestra in Gaza. We were in touch with them, and then the connection was cut. You know, today also the Palestinian telecommunications said that everything has been cut off today again. So which means tomorrow we're going to hear about more massacres. They mentioned, and I don't know if you can put it up, actually printed it up. I'll wait for it.
Which video, Rabab?
Not the video, the image, the Arabic image. I have it on my phone, but it's too tiny for me to see. I'll translate. They just sent it today, not too long ago. And they say the Edward Said Orchestra, the Edward Said Center for Music, honors and expresses condolences for the martyrdom of one of its students, Lubna Mahmoud Alayyan, from Gaza City. She was martyred with her family, her father, Muhammad Alayyan, her mother, Sally Shaheen Alayyan, and her siblings, Zain, Kanan, and Sari, in addition to tens of people who have been martyred on the morning in Nusayrat, on the morning of Tuesday, November 21st. They said that Lubna was studying in the Gaza school of the Edward Said Center to learn the violin. And she was one of the excellent students. She used to sing, she used to play for life, for happiness, and she used to want to aspire to have music part of her life and her future, and her way to represent her people, her city, and Palestine in orchestras in Palestine, Arab world, and around the world. They say, Lubna, we will miss you. Everybody who knew you will miss you. We do not even own sadness for you leaving us, you and your family and your relatives, and over 20,000 martyrs this month. we commit that we will accomplish your aspirations and that Palestine, the voices of Palestine, will be loud, locally, on the Arab world, and internationally, despite the wounds and the pain. We believe, we are convinced, that the crimes of the occupiers, the criminal occupiers, are inevitably going to go away. And we commit to our martyrs that we will not allow the enemy to ever escape accountability for these crimes. Palestinian people will never accept less than their freedom, right of return, and self-determination for all these sacrifices. Rest in peace and power, you and all the martyrs of Palestine. I want to thank the People's Forum for hosting me and this conversation with all of you today. I will speak, I will give an intervention, and we can converse with each other. We may agree, we may disagree. But I also want to thank the People's Forum, because when Facebook shut down Ahmed's page, it was the People's Forum who gave us a refuge. And we likened it at the time with the refuge Arab countries gave to Palestinian refugees, temporary refuge, until they are able to go back to their homes. And sure enough, a year later, we fought and we were able with Palestinian social media groups, Hamle and Sada Social in particular, and the big coalition, No Tech for Apartheid, to be able to get our Facebook page with all our archives, with everything on it. But we don't stop working with the People's Forum. And actually last summer, we co-organized here a forum to demand ending of the blockade of Gaza and Cuba. And we've had Cuban comrades joining us, and we had many people from Gaza. Unfortunately, there are many we do not know where they are. Some couple of young women, we cannot locate them. And one of the people who participated, Saad Ziadeh, who's the coordinator of the agricultural committees in Gaza, which has been banned as a criminal terrorist organization by the Israeli government, told us, he was involved with the World Social Forum, and he joined us from the World Social Forum from Mexico, that 22 members of his family were martyred. This is the reality. This is what we're experiencing. I also want to thank the People's Forum for the amazing People's Summit that you've organized in Los Angeles. If people do not know, please go check out the footage. This is not a commercial. This is not an infomercial. This is a truly acknowledgement and honoring the People's Forum, especially after the hatchet job fascists waged against the People's Forum in the New York Times, of course, the paper of record that records all the atrocities and changes everything. The People's Forum is here to stay, stronger than ever, and has been involved day in and day out, and I'm sure people will speak, in being very much part and parcel of all the protests around Palestine, including under the slogan, "Shut it down for Palestine." And I was researching the other day the history of San Francisco State University and the '68 strike. And I've read this report before, but I didn't notice that it was a report of 168 pages that the Nixon administration has commissioned in collaboration with Governor Reagan at the time to investigate the sources of violence at San Francisco State. And of course, they attributed to the participation of the Black Panther Party and so on. And the main director of this report was none other than William Orrick II, who was the father of the judge who presided over our case where we defeated the lawfare decisively. But they had a sign in it that said, "Shut it down." It was actually a flyer that said, "Shut it down." And I'm not sure for the younger people who started it, whether this was connected, inspired by that, or it was another organic place, whether it came up. So I wanted to just make sure that we pay tribute to the People's Forum. I want to also share with you the most recent statistics from Gaza. I checked at 8:26 a.m. The number of the martyrs were 18,608. When I checked back at 11:02, the number has risen to 187,087. Now, there were a lot of raids now with the shutdown. We do not know what has happened. The injured this morning were 50,594. By 11:02, the number has risen to 50,897. We do not know how many people are missing underground, under the rubble, because today there were many raids and there are people still. We know that Khan Yunis, for example, has floods. We know that kids do not have vaccination anymore. There is no more vaccination for children. They are worried about diseases. We know that there is many destruction of hospitals, of health clinics. Many of the medical aid professionals have been targeted, including the president of the Gaza hospital, Shifa Hospital, still in prison, being interrogated. And there is many more arrests have been taking place. Yesterday, several Palestinian prisoner groups, the Committee for the Prisoners and Liberated, the Club of the Palestinian Prisoner, Ad-Damir, and a center, Wadi al-Hilwa in Jerusalem, said yesterday there were 4,000 Palestinians arrested since October 7 in the West Bank and Jerusalem alone. Today they adjusted the figure to 4,400. And this is part of the repression Israel is doing, but I also think that it is also part of increasing the number when they bargain for the captives to be released. So they always calculate ahead. They are 2,870 administrative detainees, the highest number since the Intifada of '87. And the administrative detention orders, for anybody who doesn't know, this means that you could be held without charges, without accusation. All the charges are supposed to be in camera, which means only the Israeli prosecutor, which is military usually, and the judge, which is military because it's occupied areas, only know. The lawyers do not have any access. It's 2,100 between new and renewed ones. 6 prisoners have been martyred in this just period, recent period. And they've had arrested many people, as you saw in Gaza. I'm sure many of you have seen the images of the men who were stripped naked and made to sit. And they did the same thing, by the way, yesterday as well. Part of it is really humiliation. Part of it is to send a message to the world. And part of it because Israeli, as any kind of colonial, settler colonial government, thinks that if people are humiliated on sexual and gender things, we are going to be shying away and stop the resistance. They don't know. They haven't learned the lessons of Algeria. They haven't learned the lessons of Palestinian prisoners. They haven't learned all the people who have come out, Palestinian women, Palestinian queers, who have refused and resisted being extorted in order to collaborate with the Israeli military. They refuse. And women who have come out and spoken about the sexual violence that they have been subjected to again and again. The Rasmiya Auda's case is one of the most well-known cases, but there was also the case of Fatma Abu Bakr from Gaza, which was documented in a book called Making the Women Talk, which was collected by a number of women who support women prisoners in Britain. And they talk about what happened, and this, by the way, is continuing until today. So there are several prisoners who have been attacked. The recent prisoners who have been freed actually were beaten up and were roughed up on their way to get to be released. I think some of you have seen the scenes where they shot at the families waiting to receive the prisoners. They prevented the families of the prisoners from having other members of the family come and share the joy with them. The same way that Israel prohibits families of martyrs to go to the cemetery in numbers, above 25 people, in order to bury them. No press is allowed. We saw actually on all the press, one of the prisoners who was going to be with us, Marah Bakir, from Jerusalem, we saw them kicking out the media from the room. We heard from many of the younger prisoners that they've been beaten up. They were starved. They were denied food. All of this stuff has happened right before they were released. Now, give me a minute, because, yeah, all right. And I think this connects directly. Why take captives? Why would Palestinians do what they did on October 7, take captives? The main issue is to free Palestinian prisoners. As you know now, there is 7,500 Palestinian prisoners. Some of them have over 40 years sentence, like Nael Barghouti, still in prison. As I mentioned, the reports that we've heard, including isolation, solitary confinement for children. Many of you might have heard of the case of Ahmed Manasra, who is a young kid who's not even allowed to even get in the yard to talk to anybody, trying to make him crazy, trying to make him feel crazy. We heard all of these things that are going on today. And also, I want to argue that the Palestinians also learn lessons. And so they took notes of the Shalit exchange in 2011, and they figure, and from the bargains that have been done by Hezbollah, between Hezbollah and the Israelis in the south of Lebanon, they took a page, and they thought that this might be a way for us to be able, they already declared it. They said that's why they took Israeli captives. And I want to argue that this is part of what James Scott calls weapons of the weak. That the weak don't have much choice in choosing how they fight, when they fight, what weapons they use, how do they do it. So I think it's really important for us to think about all of this. The statistics, I think many of you who know that at least 1/4 of the Palestinians have been arrested at one point or another. After 67 alone, over 800,000 have been arrested. Every single family has at least one prisoner, one detention. We all know what prison is. We live it every single day. This is all of these things that are going on. And also, they are still holding on to bodies of prisoners and fighters who died a long time ago, who were killed a long time ago. One of the cases I'm working on and researching is the case of Dalal al-Mughrabi. In 1978, she was a commander of Fatah at the beach of Tel Aviv. Actually, Ehud Barak, the former prime minister of Israel, who so-called gave the Palestinians the generous offer, has a picture pulling her from her hair. Her body was supposed to be returned to her family. She is held and other prisoners in something called the Numbers Cemetery, where they hold prisoners, and the only party that knows who is buried where is the Israeli government, Israeli prison authorities, and Israeli security. Nobody else knows. Let's say wind comes up, nobody knows whose remains are there. But they know, and they hold them in freezers. As when we were in Palestine on the prisoners delegation, we've met with the father of one of the young men who was killed in 2015, and they held his body for about 7 months. And when they released the body finally to the family to be buried, they insisted that you cannot have more than 25 people, you have to bury after midnight, and you cannot have media. Of course, people went and participated. But when we talked with the dad, he was telling us, I don't know in what shape he is. He's in 500 centigrade under minus. Is his arm here, his leg over there? We do not know what's going on, what's happening to them. Dalal al-Mughrabi's body, the reason I mention her is because she was supposed to be returned in 1986 in a prisoner exchange. In 2008. She was supposed to be returned. And then when they did the DNA, they discovered that it wasn't her. Nobody knew what happened, who was there. Israel said that they were mixed up. Israel never gets mixed up. They know exactly what they are doing. And this is one of the collective punishment that is imposed, not only on the prisoners, on their families. So they have to continue suffering for the actions of their offsprings, thinking wrongly that this will actually teach a lesson to somebody else to surrender and give up. They haven't learned after 75 years since Nakba and all the resistance that's been going on that people are not going to give up. They're not giving up. It's very clear they're not giving up. Thank you. Yeah. But they continue to hold, and her family dug a grave for her in the Sabra and Shatila martyrs cemetery. There is 3 cemeteries in Shatila. This is the one that has all the PLO figures, Ghassan, Kanafani, Kamal Adwan. By the way, you hear Kamal Adwan a lot. Hospital now, Kamal Adwan, Kamal Nasser, and Abu Yusuf al-Najjar. There were 3 that were assassinated by the Israelis. And so this hospital was named after Kamal Adwan. And if you know anything about Palestine, you'll remember that there is a neighborhood in Gaza called Tel al-Zatar, in honor of the refugee camp that was destroyed completely in 1976. Is this part of the commemoration that has very much to do with resistance and keeping the spirit alive. But her mother, Dalala's mother, died, and she was buried in the grave. And Dalala was still being held captive. Even the body of Khadr Adnan, who we're always told by the whole world that you should only apply non-armed resistant, non-violent resistant, and so on. Khadr Adnan went on a hunger strike because he was continuously arrested again and again on administrative detention. So he went on a hunger strike. And by the way, for people who do not know, Khadr Adnan was the first Palestinian prisoner to send a solidarity message to the prisoners of Pelican Bay in California who were protesting solitary confinement. He was in prison. He sent a solidarity message to people who were like him, also on hunger strike in other places. And we started a project at that time called Pelican to Palestine, talking about the hunger strike in Pelican Bay, in Guantanamo, and in Palestinian prisons. And as a result, the prisoner delegation actually came out. That some of the people are here today, and they probably want to speak about it, if you want, without no pressure. But Khadr Adnan died out of hunger strike. He died. They refused to let him out. They refused. And it was actually also a court order from the Israeli Supreme Court. So much for the Israeli Supreme Court that the Israeli liberals actually wanted to protect from Netanyahu. You remember all of this not too long ago, right? It escaped from the news. And they refused to give his body to his family to be buried. And this is one of the utmost collective punishment, humiliating, inhumane things anybody can do to shut down resistance. So I mentioned what happened with the prisoners when they were released, what they have said about what they have experienced, including our guests in the webinar we had a couple of weeks ago with the freed Palestinian prisoners, Marah Bakir and Shuruk Dwayat, and the lawyer for Ad-Damir, Tala Nasser. It's online, if people would like to. There are some imposed conditions on the prisoners, but the prisoners don't care, they speak. However, Israel has imposed conditions on its captives that the minute they would be released, they were not allowed to talk to the media. They weren't allowed to talk to anybody until they finished being debriefed by the intelligence and by the military, because Israel was very worried that every time there is an interview with one of the captives, including those who were in captivity, they speak that they were very well treated by the Palestinians, they were taken care of, they received medicine, and it is not something that we should say, oh, this is wonderful, because Palestine is about justice. If you are a movement about justice, you have to practice justice. You cannot just say you're for justice and not do it, and starve, as Israel does, the prisoners, prevent them to having clean water, prevented, not allowing them to have medicine, torturing them, not allowing them to get out in the yard, and so on. You can do the same thing. You cannot do what your colonizers and tormentors do. You cannot. You can never do that. And of course, we all mourn all the loss of human life. We don't want any single person to die. So this is what happened with the prisoners. And the Israeli prisoners, they are not allowed because we don't know. Some of them are speaking out, and they're coming out of captivity and speaking. But we know now today, I think if any of you have noticed that there is, somebody came out with an article, I think his name is Fang, about the information war. If you haven't checked it, please check it. It only came out today. And he has been able to check this website, this WhatsApp group that's composed of Israeli military and government officials, along with big donors in the US, along with CEOs and other people, saying how are they going to punish anybody who speaks about Palestine. So he gives them an image of one woman in Ireland who posted on her website, Free Palestine, and then they got on it. Somebody says, I'm on it. And the other person says, respond. You will see by tomorrow night it's done. And actually, she was fired from her job. She worked for and you see more and more and more of this stuff going on. And we see that happening also by all the universities, and then we're seeing like new McCarthyism. Are you, or have you ever been anti-Zionist? Exactly the same as the questions that were presented to McCarthyism. The stupid questions that this woman, Elise Stefanik, even asked, are you supporting the genocide? Who's talking about genocide? Who is supporting genocide against the Jews? And of course, it's her excellent opportunity to resuscitate herself from being a liar and somebody who was saying that Trump lost the election by fraud, not because of the count and so on, and now she's coming to become a heroine to do that. But I was actually surprised by the university presidents that couldn't even answer a single question. And I almost wanted to say to them, have you ever read Ghassan Kanafani? Have you ever seen, maybe you should watch the interview he did with Australian TV, where he converted every question, saying, why are you asking me this question? When they said, do you want peace? And they say, peace for what? And they say, you don't want because it's good. It's good for what? You don't want this for the Palestinians? Said, for what? Every single question he's asked. And by the way, this is things that we learn as students ourselves, and we teach in our classes when we engage in critical race theory, in critical Palestine studies, in critical gender and sexuality studies. This is what we teach, that you always have to think. You always have to think for yourself. You cannot accept what's being given to you, because what's being given to you is a very bad version of history that has nothing to do with the history of our people, and it's intended particularly to produce docile citizens who can graduate from college and do nothing, and basically perpetuate business as usual, the status quo of injustice of everybody. So if you look at the ways that they want to change the curriculum now, for example, you see that even when they present Rosa Parks, they said that she stayed in her seat in the bus because of some things that made her uncomfortable. They don't name it racism. They don't talk about slavery. They don't talk about repression. Some euphemistic thing. Why? Because they believe they don't want to make young white kids feel uncomfortable for the sins of the founders of this country, settler colonists, who pillage, who try to genocide all the indigenous nations, and many of them they did. They kidnapped and enslaved African people, and they did so many more things and so on. They don't want people to know about that. And it's the same thing that we are being told today about so-called Jewish students might feel uncomfortable, which is a problematic. But let me go to the first one, is that why shouldn't people feel uncomfortable about the errors of their descendants? If you benefit, if you have privilege as a result of what has happened before, you should be held, at the very least, you should support reparations. Maybe you should support some tax. This is something that you pay back. Actually, this is part of you, part of the society. It's not a punishment. And it's not okay for you to get a free card, free pass, and just go on and see, okay, because you have been sent to the corner. You know, when the principal, they always punish kids to send them to the corner and so on. And this is the same thing that is being told about Jewish students. And the problem actually with that is that majority of Jewish students actually do not have a problem. They are not feeling uncomfortable. Actually, they are part and parcel of struggle for justice and for Palestine, because they are very much part of the struggle for justice for all. And I would say, and my theory about, yes, definitely, yes. My theory about that is that this is a generation, and by the way, Laura, I'm not only talking about the young people, because also older and younger people and older anti-imperialist, anti-Zionist Jews who were very much part of the historic movements and so on are there as mentors, as elders, as people who are continuing in the struggle too. And many of them, by the way, got arrested. So we also know, but the younger people, it is a generation that actually, part of the generation that elected Obama to office. Now, we have a lot of problems with Obama. We can start criticizing, we wouldn't finish, right? But the mere fact of electing a black man to the highest office of the land, to the White House, was something that white supremacists could not swallow. And the backlash that we see from white supremacists, Unite the Right, and Trump, and all of them trying to actually, Proud Boys, and the ones who tried to do the coup d'etat in the Capitol on January 6th and so on, it is they cannot imagine, they cannot fathom how is it that a black man who they might refer with derogatory terms when they're not there, they might refer to them as boy, they will refer to them by their first name, never ever recognizing their titles and so on, which, you know, this is a device to demean people who come from marginalized communities. This generation does not know, is not part of the generation that was steeped into segregation, into racism. Not that we arrived, we have a very long way to go. But they are so wrong on saying that these young people actually are feeling comfortable. And the problem with the Zionist groups is that they are attempting to speak and failing in the name of the Jews. And I think this is something really important to think about, that there are so many Jewish people who say, not in my name, never again for anyone. And I believe the actions that Jewish Voice for Peace, and if not now, carried out in Grand Central, in Congress, yes, at the Statue of Liberty, 30th session in Philadelphia, Oakland Bridge, and they continue day in and day out, is amazing. Amazing because it actually makes a very important point. You could use your privilege in order to get more rewards in society, or you could use your privilege to advance things when you do know, and I've spoken to many of my colleagues who were arrested and so on, that this is something that you can actually do because most likely will be able to be released the next day. You're not going to be roughed up in prison and so on. If a person of color, if Arab, Palestinian, Muslim, if a person who is who's working class person or so on, they're going to rot in jail forever and ever. Every single day we hear of stories of people who are released after years and years and years of being convicted unfairly. Not that we support prison at all, because many of us are prison abolitionists. But even within that, so the fact that people recognize in these organizations that this is a privilege we can actually contribute to the movement. We're not going to use our privilege to say we're not comfortable, we don't like this, we don't like that. Actually, we are going to be part of the struggle. And it's not lost on the Palestinians. Every Palestinian news agency, and I follow them all in Arabic, which is part of also the depression that I experience, they always report on all the actions that are going on. And this has a very important way of actually confronting anti-Semitism, stereotypes about Jews, that even the image of the Israeli military, that's majority is Jewish, that's inflicting wounds on the Palestinians. It challenges that and says and agrees that there is no monolithic presentation of the Jews. That Jews across time and place are not the same. That there is all sorts of people. There are people who are progressive and who fight with the movements And there are people who are collaborating and are generals in the military and perfect torture techniques and say that Palestinians should be nuked, call us animals, say all sorts of things. As you know, they said that Hawara should be completely erased and so on and so forth. And this is really important to say because it has to do with how do we conduct the struggle. This also connects with the history of the institution I come from. Because in '68, there was a whole brigade constructed only of lawyers, of faculty, who were standing by to bail out the kids who were arrested. Because over 800 students, and majority students of color, it was led by the Black Student Union, Third World Liberation Front. So you can imagine who's going to be in that strike. And their job was only to get people out of prison. And that's really important also in us thinking about how do we build movements? What kind of social movements do we build? How do we come together? Everybody has a role to play. And when do you step forward and when you step back? And when you take the lead? And when you don't? And I think this is really important for us to keep in mind. Okay, I know you all wanted me to hear, you wanted me to speak about Palestinian resistance, and I will. But I thought these are really important points to make. Because to kind of move to the next point about Palestinian resistance, actually, and I will say it didn't start on October 7th, we actually dealt with over 100 years, and it goes back to the 19th century, and it goes back to actually not many years after the Berlin Conference in 1850 divided Africa and Asia to European colonialism, actually legislated that. They were doing it already, but now we actually saw it legally made in the 1850 Berlin Conference. 1897, the first Zionist conference gets held. And the first Zionist conference led by Herzl, Theodor Herzl, who writes a book called The Jewish State. And he says he was very much affected by the Dreyfus affair, where this captain in the French army was actually prosecuted for being Jewish. It was a racist, anti-Semitic act. But his solution was to that, is that let's build a Jewish state. And afterwards, Zionists, who were much more developed and moved beyond Herzl and his collaboration with Rhodes, whose whole country, now Zimbabwe, was named after an apartheid system, they shopped it to European leaders because European Christian in power wanted to get rid of the Jews. They didn't want to, they were anti-Semitic. And so the interests of the Zionist movement and the European colonialists and capitalists and racists intersected. Take the Jews from among us, put them in another ghetto, call it whatever. At that time, it wasn't clear it's going to be Uganda, is it going to be Argentina? And then the Zionists who were not really religious at all. They thought, well, let's think about using the Torah for that. And they employed that, and they said, oh, we have long ties with the land and so on, we can justify it that way. And they did that. That's one solution, right? And that's why we call Zionism racism. And that's why we say we are anti-Zionist despite whatever they pass in Congress. They can pass whatever they want. And we do the same step as students in Colombia, I think voted yesterday or the day before, non-compliance. They said, we're not going to comply with laws that are not fair. You can pass whatever you want, you can change, and you know, university administration now change the rules. Every single time they have a new rule, and this is something that I'm very familiar with, because I think it was Harvard that prosecuted students for using a bullhorn. And I'm like, my God, this happened at San Francisco State. The university actually prosecuted students, Palestinian students. They picked them out of many students, 50 students of color and anti-Zionist students who came together and protested the visit by this racist Nir Barakat to our campus. And they prosecuted the Palestinian students for using bullhorn. And even the dean of students, who had just come back from all-paid trip to Israel, paid by the Jewish Community Relations Council, said she has never ever heard of anybody being prosecuted for using a bullhorn. And now Harvard is saying it's against university regulations to do that. So they create the laws and then they implement them. Just to finish the story about San Francisco State, so next, our university president refused to consider this guy like the KKK or Nazi and so on, invited him back. And so the students were organizing. So the university, now you can't use bullhorn anymore. You can't have sound systems, not allowed. University passed a law that you cannot have human voices above 75 decibels. Yes, I kid you not. Go look it up. Every single time something happens, they come up with new rules and regulations to control campus. Part of this is because they really don't want what happened in the 60s to happen again. They want to make sure never again. And at San Francisco, and it was very clear, all the mechanisms they did, and this is another time we can talk about that, how students wanted a College of Third World Studies, they were given a College of Ethnic Studies. All of these gimmicks that the university has done, in some ways they succeeded, but not in everything. But they said never again. Also, in order to be able to satisfy their collaborators, the people on their boards, that now is very clear. They're openly saying, you have to fire the students, you have to dox them. The trucks, not only in Harvard, in New York, by the way, outside Hunter College, some of our colleagues and some of the students we know their names have been doxed and given their addresses and their phone numbers and who they are so they can be targeted. And we know this is very dangerous times because 3 kids were shot in Vermont because they were wearing keffiyehs and speaking in Arabic. We know a child in Chicago, Wadi' Fayoumi, was killed when the guy stabbed him 26 times and said Muslims will die, and his mom was stabbed too. So we know the threat is real. We're not talking about some imaginary, I feel uncomfortable, somebody says something to me, it hurt my feelings, like Remy Kenazi has something, it's like, I'm really sorry that my suffering hurts your feelings. And so this is something that they do to regulate the campuses because it is very important because they're losing the reins over the movements. This is something that we really need to keep in mind. And I'm going to talk about the resistance now, and I hope they don't put me in prison after. But I wanted to talk about the history. The Palestinian resistance goes way back, and I wanted to mention some things that belong to Gaza, that relate to Gaza. I can't talk about the whole resistance because we do not only 1 year. People specialize and get PhDs and learn more and more, and people spend their lives in the struggle learning. And every single time, even those of us who are active, learn new things that we didn't know before. Every single day we learn new things. So there has been resistance going on in the 20s, in the 30s, after Palestinians learned of the Balfour Declaration, giving Palestine, which didn't belong to the British, to the Zionists, which it didn't belong to them, to create a land without a people for a people without a land. There were protests in the 30s, the 36-39 revolt, and I invite all of you to study it because it was an incredible case of very complicated case of alliances, of fissures, of contradictions, of who stood with whom, what happened to the labor movement in Palestine, all of these issues that actually the US labor movement also suffers from. So it's also very educational in many ways. And women, by the way, were very much part of all of these stages, as somebody who is very much interested in the role of Palestinian feminists and feminism in the Palestinian movement. And going on also even in the 40s, when there were more and more massacres, people refused to, but some of them were displaced. Many, over almost 750,000 Palestinians, at least we know, that became refugees overnight in refugee camps. So now in Gaza, the refugee camps are actually refugee camps over. Once, twice, 3 times. So people keep getting moved from one place to other too. So when Israel says, you in the north of Gaza need to leave, they're actually telling refugees whose families live not far away, think about the map, in Naqab or in Hebron, because it's very, very clear, people actually, same families, they're telling them to move again, to move from one camp to the other. So this is perpetual state of displacement. And sometimes they call it internal displaced, but we don't know if we can. How can we talk about it internal displaced? Gaza is not a country. Gaza is a small strip that's colonized and occupied. But this, even with the massacres, there were many massacres that have happened. Some of them are recognized by the world community. Some of them are not recognized because we need somebody, an Israeli scholar, with our respect for all our colleagues, to come and say, there was a massacre in Tantura, for example. Radwa Ashur, the Egyptian feminist, late Radwa Ashur, wrote a book a long time ago called The Tanturiya, about what happened to people in Tantura. Nobody believes that. Everybody questions it until an Israeli graduate student writes a thesis. His thesis gets rejected by the university because they say you're lying and you are not doing good for the state of Israel. And then an Israeli filmmaker decides to make a film about it and interviews the guys who were actually part of the massacre, who committed the massacre. And they admit that now it's truth. And this is the way the production of knowledge works. Who produces knowledge? Not only who produces knowledge, but whose knowledge is valuable and whose knowledge is not valuable, right? So we know about that. And so in my work, just to be, maybe put it clearly, is that I believe that we should always place the interests and the stories of the marginalized at the center of our analysis. The colonized, for one reason is that they're not known, but secondly, if we really want to support justice, that's what we really need to do. So there have been many, and then in Gaza in particular, Gaza was bombed during the Suez War when Israel, Britain, and France attacked Egypt because Egypt, Nasser, dared to nationalize the Suez Canal because the Suez Canal was in Egypt, wasn't part of France or Britain or something. And Gaza was bombed at the same time that Kufr Qasim massacre was taking place. There has been many activities going on. Gaza was the place where the only chapter of the Palestinian Communist Party was formed, by the way. In 1948, the Palestinian Communist Party split, became the Israeli Communist Party and the Jordanian Communist Party. But there remained a small number of Palestinian communists, led by the late Dr. Haidar Abdul Shafi. And that was many people don't even know this, right? It's not even known when people speak about the Gendanzis, the Arab National Movement, the Ba'athis, the communists in the 50s who were protesting and so on. In Gaza and the rest of Palestine were monitored by the Israelis very much from 1948 to 1967 and afterwards as well when they occupied. And inside the 48 areas, among Palestinians and Israel, organizations came out. They were subjected to martial law, curfew, from 1948 to 1966. But there were militant organizations rising up, like Al-Ard, one of their main leaders, Najla al-Asmar. She was a woman, very well known, and so on. They were very prosecuted. In Gaza, there were more and more activities, like in other parts of Palestine. So when you see the Arab National Movement, for example, Kidil formed in Lebanon, in refugee camps, in the West Bank, in Jerusalem, also it was being formed in Gaza. Not in the 48 areas. There were some illegal underground connections and so on, but that was impossible because of what Israel was doing with the martial law. After 67, things became easier to coordinate. And that's why we see in 2021, there was a mass strike all over Palestine. All the Palestinians participated because now they had actually more means to communicate with each other and coordinate their actions. But one of the highest things that have happened after 67, everywhere in Palestine, and I come from the West Bank, I come from Nablus in the West Bank, yeah, Jabal al-Nar. Are you from Nablus too? Ahla wa sahla. You've been hit hard, right, recently? Yeah. Yeah. So there were a lot of movements taking place, prosecuted by the Jordanian regime, less so by Egypt, but some control was taking place by the Egyptian authorities because they were really worried about the Palestinians going wild and basically messing up what they were trying to do. Because at that time, Egypt was trying to figure out, is it going to have alliances with the US? Is it going to have alliances with the Soviet Union? So, and this is the whole notion of the non-aligned movement in 1955, Bandung and so on. It changed later on, basically because of the imperialist aggression. It changed against it, but at that time it was really important to control the Palestinians. So there were a lot of groups. For example, the National United Front was formed underground in the West Bank and in Gaza. People were coordinating with each other. They were actually hit hard. Many people were imprisoned and deported to Jordan. In Gaza, there is a story that I thought was very important, and it's on the flyer. It's this guy. His name is Muhammad al-Asmar, and his nom de guerre was Guevara Gaza. And Guevara Gaza was one of the leaders of the resistance in Gaza. He was martyred on March 9th, 1973. And he was 26, 27 years old, a young kid. And he came from Shati refugee camp. You know, we know now the Shati, everybody knows Shati refugee, beach, it means beach refugee camp. He joined the Arab National Movement in 1963 and became a leader of the popular resistance vanguard groups, and arrested in January 15th, 1968. I was trying to figure out how did we adopt the name Guevara? What happened? Because actually Che Guevara was killed when Guevara Gaza was in prison, because he spent 2.5 years in prison. He was arrested on, let me see, I wrote it down. He was arrested in July 1970. No, he was released in July 1970, arrested in January 15th, 1968. And Che Guevara was killed on October 9th, 1968. So he was in prison, but by that time he was already called Guevara. So we do know, we can expect that there is all this cross-fertilization and communication between movements, internationalists, and so on, for somebody to actually name before Che Guevara was martyred. Now, and many people in Gaza named their children Guevara. One of very well known is Guevara al-Buderi. Guevara al-Buderi, who's one of the main reporters of Al Jazeera. Her name is Guevara al-Buderi. Her parents named her after Che Guevara. So we have a lot of Guevaras in Palestine, but it is impossible that his name, he took it because of after Che Guevara was martyred. Some connections might have happened, which I'm looking into. If somebody finds out, please let me know. I would be very much interested. And what he was doing, he was engaged in resistance, in all sorts of resistance. And this is the lesson, that you have to engage in all, you don't have a choice, but to engage in all forms of resistance. So aside, and I will talk about his role as a resistor, as a militant, as a fidai, but he also organized social, women, labor committees, support for families of martyrs. He organized a central library and branches of libraries throughout Gaza for political and organizational education. I know that there are some people here from PYM, Palestinian Youth Movement. I know they are here, right? Yes, because you know, PYM is actually translating the book of one of the Palestinian leaders, Wissam Rafidi, who was in prison, wrote his memoirs in prison, and he actually talks about the political education. That's a very important part, that actually it was being done outside and inside prison as well. And actually maybe even in prison more important, because you don't have access to anything else and you really need that. And that's what allows prisoners to be steadfast throughout. But he was also very much leading a role against Israeli designs to force Gaza into displacement. This was not only now. They were actually at that time trying to force Gaza to displacement. So a lot of the actions that they did basically forced Israeli tourists to stop going to Gaza for a while, right? And then he was, he engaged in demonstrations and strikes, led them and organized them with other people. We know about him because he was martyred. There are a lot of people we don't know about them because they remain nameless because they're still alive. So you don't want to actually betray or know or even ask. Sometimes you don't really want to ask. You don't have to know everything. It's okay not to know everything. It's fine. It's a revolutionary act not to know everything. And so he was known to develop, to really be emphasizing revolutionary consciousness, was very much engaged in criticism and self-criticism. And I think this is very interesting because at that time, political leftist organizations, Marxist organizations of the PLO and elsewhere, people used to say they were for democratic centralism with emphasis on democracy, but it was really on centralism. Criticism and self-criticism wasn't always very popular. People may have done it, but not everybody. So for him to actually, this is we're talking about the early 70s, like that, somebody who's really very advances, and sort of like somebody like Ghassan Kanafani. When you read what Ghassan Kanafani says and you think about, my God, he was so young in his 30s when he was assassinated, and he produced and he thought about all of these things, is that, of course, definitely the environment has a lot to do with it, but also there is a specific role to individuals who work within the collective, who do not work outside of the collective individually. So they're not interested in promoting themselves, they're actually interested in promoting the struggle, and they do whatever they need to do as part of the struggle. Guevara Gaza was 4 years underground. By the way, very similar to Wissam Rafidi, but many other. To be underground under Israeli occupation is not easy. I mean, they know, they have informers, they always have the jeeps going around, you always see them. For him to be 4 years underground and underrun, And people must have been supporting, giving food, giving shelter. We're assuming some of this stuff is happening now. We do not know. We'll know the stories maybe 10 years or maybe a few years from now, but not now, but not yet. And Gaza is very small. It's a very small area, and it doesn't have the advantages what Che Guevara and the July 26 movement had. We have no forests. It's a very flat. It's very easy to be caught. So this is incredible to actually, I mean, I have to tell you, when I was researching this, I need to learn more about that. So I put in a lot of codes for people, but now folks don't have time to respond to research questions and don't have phones and don't have internet. So he shuttled everywhere, and his tactic was, and I translate directly, hit your enemy several quick, repeated blows in many sides, not close to each other, but at the same time. And why he pursued this tactic? And he said, so they would lose their mind and ability to think and act against the community. Why did he do that? Because what Israel used to do, that every time a Palestinian engages in an action, they will impose curfew over the whole population for more than a week, deny people food, deny people water, deny people anything, and torture and attack folks and so on. So this was something to lift the pressure of the people who were there. So indeed, he did actually succeed into that a lot. And I was actually reading also some other accounts from other people looking about Che Guevara himself. And one of the Israeli writers was saying, who's sympathetic to the Palestinians, saying that Israel was very closely monitoring Gaza. So how is it that he escaped? We do not know, but he did. But then, so he did succeed in breaking Israeli troops at that time. And so Israel stopped imposing curfew on a whole neighborhood and collective punishment for quite a while. And so they will do it only in the surrounding area for a few hours and then leave. Okay, I mean, that's torture in itself, but it's easier than having a whole week. His biggest operation was when he actually led to a battle with the killing of 4 Israeli soldiers and injury of many. And the Israeli military deployed 20,000 soldiers in Gaza to find him, to look for him. It did lift the morale of the population, demoralize the Israelis, but the Israelis said, this is it, we need his head. Same what they're saying now, they need the heads of people. That's no ifs or buts about it, they want to do it. And they're vindictive. And when it comes to this, they don't remember the massacres, they don't remember the colonization, but they remember that they would like to be vindictive. Exactly what happened with the October 7th, because all their security apparatus, or all their networks and all their spying things were broken. It wasn't only the killing of Israelis and taking captives, but this sophisticated thing with the Iron Dome, with everything else, was actually demobilized. So, like, how dare you little people from Gaza stand up to us? So he participated in an operation, and this was on March 9. The house was surrounded. It was behind Shifa Hospital. Now you know Shifa Hospital from. Hundreds of soldiers came in. He still refused to surrender. Him and 2 other comrades, Abdulhadi al-Hayek and Kamel al-Umsi. They fought back until the 3 of them were martyred. The Israeli war minister, Moshe Dayan himself, who was actually enlisted to go give advice to the US troops in Vietnam, who were occupying Vietnam, he himself came to Gaza to make sure that it was Guevara, Gaza, who died. You know, this is very similar to Che Guevara, because the CIA actually sent specialists to make sure it was Che Guevara who was killed. And if you go to Cuba and you go to the Museum of the Revolution, I mean, it's very, very sad, because you see his, the stretcher that he was on, you see the pictures. But Moshe Dayan came, and Moshe Dayan used to say, we rule Gaza during the day, and Che Guevara Gaza rules it during the night. So he was martyred. But there are other things for Gaza. I mean, many other people were martyred that continue after that. After 1970s, Gaza also participated in many struggles leading up to the 1987 Intifada. Actually, the 1987 Intifada broke out in Gaza. There is many organizing of communities, of committees, of structure that making it possible for the 1987 Intifada to last 5 years. If there was no organizing before, it would not have lasted. I think, okay, let me just a minute. I think I had the rest of the history in another one. How will get it? In 1993, the US, the Israel, and the PLO signed the Oslo Accords. And the title of the Oslo Accord was Gaza and Jericho first. So Israel would withdraw from Gaza and from Jericho only. The rest of the place, they call it redeployment. So the areas in the West Bank, A, B, and C, that people hear about, that's all was redeployment, wasn't really total withdrawal. And the agreement that the PLO made with Israel is that Israel can come in any time at night and raid and so on. Of course, Israel is breaking a lot of the rules, but if you don't hold bullies accountable, they will do whatever they want to do. And so that was, at that time, actually, was something very interesting happened. The Shati refugee camp, some Palestinians tried to create a chalet, a resort, on the Shati camp, taking part of the beach and making it exclusive use for them, not open to the rest of the people, including people from the camp. Of course, all of this stuff has fallen apart because the Palestinian Authority is crumbling. But Gaza continued struggling. I remember in 1998, when I went to do my field research for my PhD, actually I learned about the phenomenon called SCOT from women in Gaza. I wanted to interview, so they invited me. The Women's Studies Center, everybody was sitting around the room, and the women started saying, one of the most dangerous things during the Intifada is a SCOT. And I said, what's a SCOT? They said, a SCOT making one fall. So the Israeli collaborator, what they try to do is they try to catch women in compromising positions, take pictures of them, and say to them, you either collaborate with us, or we're going to expose you. So what the women started developing, a technique, a strategy, saying, don't drink Coke or RC. Not Pepsi or RC. Coke is not banned, boycotted in Palestine. Not now, after Oslo, but it was before. And they said, even if you're in your brother's house, don't even take a can that's open, because you don't want to be tricked into that. Of course, later on, with the Palestinian queer activism, from Al-Qaws and queers for BDS and Aswat and so on, we found out that it was the same tactic that was also used against queer Palestinians to do the same thing, to entrap people in order to become collaborators. And this is something that they do all the time. And it was actually, I mean, one of my best interviews in Gaza. But in 2000, Gaza participated in the Aqsa Intifada and was actually so vicious in its resistance to the Israeli occupation that in 2005, Israel decided to withdraw from Gaza. So Israel decided to withdraw from Gaza, decided to dismantle the settlement, but Israel was supposed to hand over the settlements to the Palestinian Authority and the Palestinian people because they already had used the irrigation, they had orange orchards, and so on. They destroyed every single structure, the water irrigation, the orchards, the trees, the houses. They destroyed everything when they left. You know how you talk about not only scorched earth policy in the meantime, but also in the future, in perpetuation? They did that. But that is also, Gaza became a liberated area. In 2006, people know, there were Palestinian elections because Condoleezza Rice and the US government insisted that Palestinians should have elections. Palestinian Authority told the US, we're not ready, we're going to lose. The US insisted, because at that time, remember, they were trying to make the Middle East another thing, and Condoleezza Rice was talking about the birth pangs of a new democracy and all of these fantasies that they had. So they forced Palestinians to have elections. Hamas won half of the seats. Even the Christian mayor of Bethlehem voted for Hamas. I was there. I spent a month in Palestine. And actually, I was sitting at the table with every member. Every member of my family voted for a different party. It was very like to hear the fighting on the lunch table. It was very interesting. Whose candidate was better? Whose program was better? Was this because you voted for a bloc in the nationally and you voted for the individuals in the localities? It was amazing, and we interviewed a lot of people. We had 10 teams. It was very clean elections, and Carter actually took also people to observe the elections. Of course, the US doesn't like these results. Whenever the US doesn't like results, the US is going to do something about it. So the US and Israel imposed the blockade, which is part of what we're seeing in Gaza in 2007. That has been going on. Gaza was already blockaded. It was also very, very difficult to get to Gaza. You had to have a permit to go even before 2006, even before Israel withdrew in 2005. You always had to have a permit. You couldn't just walk into Gaza. But Israel imposed the blockade, and imposed the blockade preventing food, preventing medicine, preventing building material, and also making it only possible for the fishermen to fish beyond 3 miles outside of the water. And now they're shooting at the people they've been doing it all the time, like killing their livelihood and so on. So there is more things that have happened since in Gaza, the participation, the resistance and so on. There's many wars that we know, 2008, 2009, 2012, which was only stopped earlier because at that time Egypt has elected Mohammed Morsi as the president, who actually negotiated a deal with Israel to end that. 2014 we know, and we know what happened, and we know all the things that actually exposed Israel with all the images that they were doing. 2021 when there was the mass unity of the Palestinians, and now we think about 2023. With this blockade, with these conditions in Gaza, why shouldn't people break out of their captivity? Why not? Palestinians don't really think that this border is a border. They believe that it's a colonial border. They don't believe the settlements around are actually legitimately belong to people. Even the whole propaganda, and yesterday there was a big article in the New York Times written by none other than Isabel Kirshner, and they should really put her on the payroll of the Israeli intelligence because she's editorializing all the time. She's not actually reporting. She talks about the kibbutzim as being the valiant farmers who are building the utopia. And mind you, only 2-5% of the Israelis live in kibbutzim. And if it's really the farmers doing it, what were the Thai and the Filipino workers doing there? What were migrant workers doing? They were not co-owning. Definitely they were not co-owning. Because you cannot co-own. The Jewish National Fund is the only one, and the state of Israel that owns the land. But they're not Israelis, they're not Jews. What were they doing there? So all of this facade actually crumbles. But you have to dig into every single word you hear. Many times they refer villagers. Why you're calling them villagers? They're settlers. I'm not saying that they should have been killed. No, I think everybody should be treated nicely. But they're settlers. These were settlements. They were colonizers. This is part of the settler colonial project of Zionism on the land of the Palestinians. And every Palestinian who says, I'm anti-Zionist, rejects this formula and would like to see a different kind of arrangements where people are not differentiated by which part you come from. Whether you belong to Jewish supremacy or you belong to the inferior party that, according to Frantz Fanon, you have no rights whatsoever. And you're supposed to accept, this is the other thing, you're supposed to accept your subjugation. You're supposed to accept submission. And you're supposed to surrender and say, I accept, willingly and happily. Willingly and happily. And this is why Israel has a serious problem with this recognition business. It's not just normalization. It has a serious problem because people question whether a settler colonial regime that is based on supremacy of one people is okay. It's not okay. So this is where we're at now. And I want to just end by saying that I think it's really important for us to rethink, reframe, question all the terms that we're hearing. When they say Islam, Hamas, Israel, it's not Hamas, Israel. It's Israel against the Palestinians. When they say this is something that is just the retaliation, it's genocide. It is genocide when you're killing 60% of the children, and where 50,000 women are pregnant and giving birth in horrible conditions, when you are eliminating the next generation of the Palestinians. This is genocide. There is no other way to call it. This is genocide. So it looks like it looks like people are not giving up. Now, Israel is actually demanding another ceasefire. I don't know if you heard the latest news. And the Palestinian, they want like a pause. And the Palestinians say, no, we're not going to discuss anything until there is a complete ceasefire, complete. Not just little bit here and there so you can go bring more troops and buy more weapons from the US and come and kill us. We're not going to accept it. Israel did not achieve. And this is very dangerous because Israel is very arrogant and really thinks that it's been humiliated in October 7th. It's been humiliated. So we're going to see worse and worse. But also what's really very encouraging is the response from people around the world. The rising movement around the world, that people around the world are saying, no, we are not going to allow Palestinians to be slaughtered. And I wonder, I'm not sure, but I wonder if we're seeing another Vietnam moment. Is this a Vietnam moment? I don't know, it might be too soon. But I keep thinking about the kids who burned their draft cards. I keep thinking of people little by little who defied. The students from Harvard and everywhere, I'm not talking about Daniel Pipes, who wrote something, by the way, 2 years ago, being so proud about spying on his fellow students. Like, if you're spying, you wouldn't actually make it public. At least you'll be embarrassed. But he did. But we're seeing more and more defiance. And we saw a movement small, but it got bigger and bigger and bigger. And with the resistance of the Vietnamese people and the support of the world community, 1975, Vietnam became free. Yes, it's an amazing victory, but it cost 3 million people, 3 million Vietnamese who were killed. We still see the effect of napalm and Agent Orange. We still see the destruction and the landmines. Not all of them have been removed. And we ask, if we have learned a lesson as humanity, whether we're talking about Vietnam, or we're talking when the world stood by and allowed the Holocaust to take place, including many European countries that they knew it was going on, and they closed the door to Jews who were trying to actually escape to safety. Is the world going to be able to intervene before more and more and more generations of Palestinians are lost? I believe so. I believe that we will. But I believe that we don't have time. The time is now. It's urgent, demanding a ceasefire, demanding an end of all US aid, prosecuting Genocide Joe and all his flukies, holding university presidents accountable, speaking up in our organizations and communities and so on, standing up like the kids in Colombia and other places did everywhere who are doing, standing up and saying no, not in our name. Not only for the Jewish comrades, for all of us. Not in our name. We're not going to allow this genocide to continue. And we will band together until victory. Thank you. From the river to the sea. We're going to show a short video just to show one sign of protest that I think is very telling and is very appropriate. So I'm going to leave it up. Let's just go to the last one. Yeah.
Maria Santa, Bilbauriona, Beisati bat, Candida mias.
جسده محروق سراج عبد الله صار محمد حسوني
Agapita iturralde, zuloaga ez da, Maria Iturralde Zuloaga, Gernika.
Abdullah Ramadan Abu Ghazal مريم تفواسل موسى في غزة
Daniel Ibarzabal Katxalinarrien jaio
أنوار محمد علي دنيا مهدي حمد
Juana Beotegi Bilbao Jacinta Gandiaga
محمد فرج الله سليم محمد وآل خياط
Guernica
في غزة
Guernica في Gaza Guernica في Gaza Guernica في Gaza
Just for people who do not know, this was in Guernica, the Basque village that was completely bombed during Nazism. It wasn't Berlin. It wasn't the headquarters of Hitler. It was Guernica, the Basque, and it was enabled by fascist Franco of the Phalange that enabled it to be destroyed. We visited it. And if you visit and you see, there is a whole wall that shows you the rubble behind. This is the response of people who've been targeted, to recognize the pain and the suffering of others and saying, we stand with you and we're not going to allow it to happen.
So we have some time for discussion now, yeah, Rabab? So Rabab, I'll let you call on folks.
Yeah, I
would like
think
to
we
speak.
were going to ask for all the comrades who co-sponsored the organization if they would like to see. Yes, Vanessa Ramos, I don't even know you.
I want to say the year
I
because
will
that
say
would
it
discover
either.
our ages. But anyway, a pleasure and solidarity from Puerto Rico, from the independence movement of Puerto Rico. And the streets are talking. The streets are for Palestine. So that other world is possible. Because, you know, regardless of what government says, including this one, people are raising their voices to defend Palestine. And this is an opportunity also to educate ourselves. I learned a lot today. I didn't know so many things about Gaza, but we have to go back and say, what is exactly genocide? And, you know, I brought the letter of the Convention of the Prevention and Punishment of the Crime of Genocide, and you can look it up because, you know, I always carry this now in my purse. So, because sometimes people say, no, you're exaggerating. No, I'm not when it comes to Palestine. And this is Article 2 of the Convention. In the present Convention, genocide means any of the following acts committed with an intent to destroy, in whole or in part, a national, this is the Palestinians, ethnical, racial, or religious group as such, A, killing members of the group. 20,000 people have been killed. B, causing serious bodily or mental harm to members of the group. We have seen too many of these. C, deliberately inflicting on the group conditions of life calculated to bring about the physical destruction in whole or in part. There are no telecommunications. Homes have been destroyed. Cultural centers have been destroyed. Universities have been destroyed. Hospitals have been destroyed. There's no health systems. There's no medicine. There's no fuel. So this is creating the conditions to destroy the group. D, imposing measures intended to prevent birth within the groups. How many Palestinian women are pregnant in Gaza and they are preventing those births? And E, forcibly transferring children of the group to another group. So always keep this in mind, and also this is also a parallel to the Geneva Conventions. There's the third convention about treatment of prisoners of war, and Palestinian prisoners are prisoners of war. This is a land under occupation. And the fourth convention about the treatment of civilians when there is armed conflict or occupation. And we know that this has been violated. And let's not talk about UN resolutions, Security Council, etc., and the rulings of the International Criminal Court. I just wanted to leave that there so that you go and and look it up, because this conversation is so important. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think Steve.
Thanks for all that, Rabab. I'm Steve. I'm with the New York chapter of Jewish Voice for Peace. We have been so proud to work alongside our Palestinian and Muslim-led organizations in, fighting for ceasefire and an end to military aid to Israel. We, have also, done, some of our own rather spectacular actions, which Rabab referenced at Grand Central and the Capitol Rotunda and elsewhere. And basically out there to assert ourselves as proud anti-Zionists, to try to bust up the lazy equation that continues to get made between Jews and support for Israel. I appreciate, Rabab, the sumud that you exemplified in your talk, because as ghastly as what is happening in Gaza right now, you end on this note of optimism. And I guess I would like to meet that with my own, well, a little bit of bad news, but I think this is going to work out in our favor. Just today, Rutgers has banned its chapter of its SGP. And for as much hay as conservatives are making right now out of, this McCarthyite, hearing that happened, last week and the fallout from that, I think at Rutgers, it's going to be a very different story, because they have a brilliant labor organizer in Sherry Wolf and a whole. They won a great contract for their faculty and grad students last year, and they're very well organized. And I think they have no idea what's coming, but I think it's going to, there's going to be a great pushback against this that hopefully will, stand to be an example for all the further shit that is likely to be coming down at the universities and elsewhere, we hope.
Thank you, Steve. PYM. We're co-sponsors, so go ahead. It's over there.
Right? Oh, there you go.
Hi, everybody. I'm Summer. I'm with Palestinian Youth Movement.
Hi, I'm Mariam, also with the PYM.
I think something we really liked about your presentation, Rabab, is the kind of historical depth that you're giving us about Gaza and the history of resistance there, which is really not known or talked about, at least in our context. And there's so many ways in which our history has been completely suppressed and erased in our histories of resistance. And I was thinking about a little bit about the history of Gaza as like the thorn in the side of the enemy from the very beginning, from before 1948, but especially 1948 as a land that is populated by majority refugees. And just like something I wanted to share to the group here is in the 1950s there was and you kind of referenced it a bit, but there was a real strong resistance movement in Gaza. There was actually kind of a crisis for the Zionist state, which at that point was, you have to remember, it projects this image of itself as like impenetrable, kind of invincible kind of entity. But there was, at that point it was a very newly formed state, and they're like weak in many senses, and there was an organized resistance project from Gaza that was supported by Egypt, which was administering, especially after 1952 when Nasser came to power. They supported the resistance there. There was actually a military commander of the name Mustafa Hafiz, who organized a lot of Palestinian refugees there to go carry out resistance into the Zionist entity, which you have to remember also these are many, like the land there is mostly villages from which Palestinians in Gaza had been ethnically cleansed and forced out of. So I really just wanted to emphasize like that it's important for us to also like deepen our knowledge of Palestine broadly, but also in terms of the like really deep tradition and like the tactics that you spoke of resistance, and to really understand these because it's something that they've been trying for since 1948 to really stamp out, like the Allen Plan, and I think in 1967, which one of the that was a plan that was formed by like, I forget his first name, maybe you know. It's Allon. Allen. Alone. Oh, but
It was Israeli, but
right.
there were also American, several groups.
Right, exactly. Yeah, the Americans were supporting this plan, and part of it, they had a plan for each region that was occupied after '67. And in Gaza, one of the plans was really just to remove all the every single Palestinian there to Jordan. This was the plan. So we have to understand that what the Americans and the Zionists have been doing from the very beginning has been trying to essentially eradicate Gaza, because it continues to remain as a compass of our struggle. And so it's really important that we historicize it. I don't know if you want anything. Okay, that's all.
Anybody else from the co-sponsors? Yes. Here and then. We agreed that we're going to get the co-sponsors to speak first, and then everybody discuss it. Yeah. I think who else wanted to speak? Go ahead. You wanted, the brother here wanted. His hand up from the beginning.
Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum assalam.
Yeah, my name is Michael Aziz Abi Shabazz. You know, I'm a former political prisoner. Did a lot of time on a modern day slave plantation. And given this in context of what's going on in the world today in reference to the situation circular, there is no question that this is genocide that's going over there in Palestine, and the people being oppressed, et cetera, et cetera. And it emotionally disturbs the world, because we see the international people in general rising up. But the problem we got is the propaganda, a whole bunch of bullshit. And I emphasize bullshit because there's terminology that's being propagated and said which is no truth in it. And take for a typical example, words. Man is mind and words make people. And when you start talking about anti-Semitic, there's a misunderstanding of what Semitic is. The framers of the news, of people on the news media, they've made anti-Semitic just to mean so-called Jewish people. And when I say so-called Jewish people, Jew in itself is a misnomer, because when you look at the language, the letter J didn't even come into the English language until something like 1600. The original people is Hebrew, because you got the philosophers over there, which the black people, et cetera, when you get into the history. So when you look at a certain terminology and understanding that in this kind of, we got to keep this in a contextual situation. We can't just look at the effect, we got to look at the cause. But talking about anti-Semitic, everybody over there in the area is Semitic people. So if you want to keep it real or keep it official like pink toilet tissue, everybody over there are Semitic people. So when you're talking about being anti-Semitic, you're talking about everybody over there. But a lot of people just misunderstand it to mean that to just the Caucasian people over here. And that's not the truth. We're talking about the whole area is Semitic. And I want to emphasize that point. You know, I can go on, but we're dealing with genocide, and we all against that. Assalamu alaikum.
I think this brother will have it, and then Laura has a question. Yeah, of course, yes. Yes. You're the boss.
Assalamu alaikum all, and thank you very much, Dr. Rabab Abdulhadi, for your well-informed and really full of brainy intellect, your words. My name is Shahid Comrade, and I'm a Secretary General Pakistan USA Freedom Forum. I'm going to share with you, Doctor, and everybody who's against the occupations, my nation, my motherland, Pakistani, we are 100% behind Palestinian struggle and against any occupation in the world by anyone or backed by any superpower. Let me say the names, USA and West. These are the two culprits nowadays. Funny thing is this, those countries, they have one of the best educated, highly educated brains in any kind of, in economics, in journalism. But thank God to the youth of the world and the common people, how they comes out, they took the street. So this is a very good sign that we still remember sacrifices of the Vietnam for sovereignty, sacrifices of the Taliban in Afghanistan now. And there's no need to be shy to stand with those people who's against the occupation and monopolist and mentality of the occupied and the controlling. My General Asim Munir, he is visiting nowadays in Washington, and we have very much suspicious. But I'm going to assure you what's going to happen, they decide with the CIA, Mr. General Asim Munir, and our CIA ISI chief, Nadeem Anjum, Pakistani nation behind the struggle of the freedom. And anywhere where the CIA doing some shit and Netanyahu doing some shit, we condemn this thing. And thank you very much, all of you. You people are the beautiful faces and brain and future of this kid. But one thing last, Pakistan USA Freedom Forum, we think this is the time we have to do more for the freedom of our free, highest education in this country, USA, MIT, Harvard. Leaders pay the price, and this is our job. So tomorrow, there will be no brain will resign, saying something good and freedom of speech. Thank you very much, everybody. Doctor?
I think Sister Laura and then Ryan.
Take
Laura.
me.
I'm Laura Whitehorn. I'm also a member of JVP, and also was on the delegation that Rabab spoke about before with my partner Susie Day, the prison labor and academic trip to, not trip, it was a contingent going to Palestine. I had been a supporter of Palestine because I'm an anti-imperialist for many years, but being there in 2016 was, I didn't see anything I didn't know before, but there was something about seeing it that was very important, and it made me understand why the Zionists make that bullshit birthright tour, and they show what they want of Israel. So I just wanted to say one thing about, I think, our job here. And working with other formerly incarcerated people, which is what I do, I find that there is an immediate understanding of the connection between white supremacy and settler colonialism of Israel against Palestine and white settler colonialism against black, brown, and indigenous people here. But we need to build within the movement that is arising now, which I have to say, having been among, what were we, like 10 people protesting the Israel Day Parade back in 70-something, now seeing hundreds and thousands, 1,500 of us took over the Manhattan Bridge. There were people, older Jews, chained themselves to the White House fence this week. People have shut down every fucking major highway in the United States. While we were on that panel last night, someone texted me, they were in LA. The narrative that has been so powerful in this country, and which even people who are going out in the streets still believe, is that Israel is a legitimate state and has the right to self-defense. And I think what we have to do is be educating people, taking them back through that history of Zionism, history of the creation of the settler colonialist state of Israel, and show them why this is not a war between two legitimate entities. This is a war of national liberation against a settler colony that does not have the right to be recognized. The thing about Israel, everyone has to kiss the hem and say, yes, I recognize the right of Israel to resist. We do not have to do that. And as Jews, some of us are most able to say that. I want to say one other thing, which is that the Zionists have been organizing in our social movements. And in the prison movement, they tried to create what was it called? The Jewish Council on Public Affairs tried to create an organization of Jewish women, like me and others, who are active in the movement against mass incarceration. And the purpose of it was to recreate the beautiful alliance of black people and Jews that they say existed in the civil rights movement, which was, of course, before the Black Power movement and the '67 war split that beautiful alliance down the middle. And they were trying to do that in order to organize people, and especially black people, to support Israel. And we have to look for all of that in our movements and see where we can overturn it. The last thing I'll say is right now what we're doing in the groups I'm in is political education while we're taking people out into the streets, because this is a long struggle. And it is true that Palestine will win, but we want to be there side by side at every point. And if we don't work to counter the narrative that goes on all the time, if I see one more statement that's supposed to be supportive that starts out condemning both Hamas and Israel, that is not what we want to create. We want to create a real movement of solidarity, and I think we are doing that as we speak. And thank you, Rabab, for telling us that.
Yeah. Want to give a shout out to my comrade Laura Whitehorn. I love you, Laura. We do the work together in this space. My name is John McFarland. I'm sitting back here with some of my comrades. You might know us. We are Vocal New York. We stand for all issues humanitarian, no matter what. I want to say this. It's a shame that the U.S. government will back a genocide of people, no matter what color, no matter what ethnicity, no matter what institution, because you say a radical few mounted an attack. Right? It's a shame that the globalist and imperialistic movement that calls the U.S., which, by the way, boasts the largest amount of incarcerated people on the planet, will sit back and say, you know what, we'll send billions of dollars of military aid to Israel so they could commit genocide on a brown people, on a people that are smothered, enslaved in a 25-mile stretch of earth on the other side of this country. We don't stand for that at Vocal New York. You understand? We don't stand for that, and we will never be in support of that. Should we have, let me ask you a question. 1941, I believe, the anniversary was a few days ago. Should America have dropped 22 bombs, atomic bombs on Japan instead of 2? Because we got hit in Pearl Harbor? That ain't right. You understand? Should we have fucking devoured, annihilated the whole country? Because they came and attacked us on our military base, that wouldn't have been right. So why are we going to support, why are we going to acquiesce in a genocide that 30,000 kids, not kids, 30,000 Palestinians, kids included, hospitals are being bombed, churches are being bombed, houses are being bombed. You can't extricate Hamas by bombing the whole fucking country. That ain't right. So we stand in strict opposition to what is going on. We stand in strict opposition to Genocide Joe and his permission and his acquiescence in allowing Israel to do that on TV, on our MacBooks, on our tablets, in front of our own fucking eyes and our kids' eyes. We stand in strict opposition to the humanitarian punishment that's going on today. Thank you. My name is John McFarland, Vocal New York.
Thank you very much. I'll just say one thing briefly, and then I'll hand it to you, Rabab. Okay. I just want to say deeply thank you so much, Rabab, for being here. Someone who's been with the People's Forum for longer than I have, and has been in the movement, many, many years. And so important from the very beginning that we began talking about this event, Rabab emphasized that that the topics would be both genocide, the genocide that's happening right now, but resistance. That resistance has always been central to Palestinian history. And Rabab, who is such a wealth of knowledge, I think has given us a lot to continue to study, to continue to look at throughout history. So thank you for that. And I also deeply appreciate that you ended with the video in Guernica, because the international solidarity, this is what we can do here, is continue to build an international movement in solidarity with Palestine. I want to make sure that you all know on Saturday we have another rally. There's a flyer right here, a March for the Martyrs. It's at Herald Square at 2 p.m. There are also rallies that are happening around the country on Saturday. It's another day, Shutting It Down for Palestine. You can find it on shutitdownforpalestine.org. And we need to continue to build this movement. It's central for us to continue to build this movement. With that, I'll hand it back to you, Rabab. Thank you.
I just want to thank everybody for being here, for waiting for a long time, for staying up on a weeknight. It's very exhausting. We've been going from one event to another, from one protest to the other. We're organizing because it's really an emergency. But the fact that people are responding, it keeps our morale going. And we hear about every single day more death, but it keeps our morale going. And that's what really keeps us together. And that's really important for Palestine. It's important for this country. It's important for the world. It tests our conscience. So thank you all for being here. And thank you for your solidarity and support. And together, venceremos.